And now we're going to answer some more of your questions. And Douglas, question here from Dan, who asks, where and how do customer energy efficiency programs fit into the evolving business models?
That's a great question. We have quite a few customer energy efficiency programs, and they don't really fit into a smart grid model when you're starting to talk about technologies and applications. Where they do fit in is by allowing us the opportunity to delay more construction for lines, more generation, because the cost of energy efficiency as compared to these added costs in the future for generation and lines is a better deal. So it doesn't integrate right into the technology. It does integrate into the master planning for systems.
Here's a question from Paul, and Douglas, I'll weigh in, but I'll ask Ron and Kevin if they have a thought as well. And Paul asks, Google buys Nest, and Google's buying wind farms and so on. Is Google the proof of what the future is going to look like? Is Google going to disaggregate or disintermediate to sort of become the energy partner rather than the utility?
I think Google will be a player in it just like any other independent power producer is. As we look into the future, we have several connected to our system. Google's investment in the Nest thermostat is just basically a viewpoint that the majority of people are seeing smart devices within the home as a key piece to customers being able to manage their bills and manage their usage without a lot of manual effort on their own part.
Ron or Kevin, do you have thoughts on the implications of Google acquisition?
This is Ron. I can share one observation. I commented in my slides about the evolution of smart cities and the way consumers are getting more and more involved. And of course, Google has a very strong focus on various consumer bases. And I think this is an example of where this is one discrete example of where a company that deals with consumers is seeing an interest in the part of consumer awareness and engagement evolving. So I do think they will have an influence. I think it's too early to tell exactly where this will actually lead in terms of what kind of business models and so forth. But I do think you'll see not only this, but other companies that are technology-driven companies start to enter into spaces where there are shifts in the way the overall energy industry conducts business and as these different types of trends roll out. So I think it is something to watch, and I think there'll be some lessons learned from this type of engagement by Google.
Thank you. Brian asked, there have been multiple references to disruptive technologies and trends, and in fact we've had a number of questions around this, so let's try to maybe drill down a little more. But as he asks, has anyone considered the need to address and adapt an archaic business model that's presently used in our industry? A lot of questions about regulators and a sense of, okay, we know maybe this business model is being threatened, but what specifically can we do to begin moving toward a better alternative? I'll throw that open to anyone.
This is Douglas. One of the things, and it was mentioned earlier, the key thing to the business model is learning how to adapt and how to adapt quickly, which utilities have never really been good at. But if you go back to the original electric system, the adaptability, those that won succeeded, and those that did not adapt did not. Regulators need to be educated, and you have to have a continuous dialogue with your regulators and with the staff members in those regulator groups so that they can understand the evolution that's occurring in the business and the needs consumers are looking at and what you can do to supply those needs. The education is critical going forward, and it's got to be continuous dialogue.
Kevin or Ron, any additions to that?
One comment I'll be happy to throw out on this as well is, as the business models evolve, not only do you need to take a look at the overall landscape and the things we've talked about in this webinar, but I think there needs to be a real focus on the part of utilities of who is ultimately buying what we offer or who is ultimately consuming what we provide, and think of ways to create more value for those consumers of the product or service, and to look at more models beyond just what you offer today that might fit within the context of core competence within the utility.
I'll ask maybe Douglas to start with this next question, but Ron and Kevin jump in if you have thoughts as well. And the question is, how do you see these risk mitigation strategies affecting capital budgets and asset replenishment plans?
I think the risk mitigation strategy is absolutely necessary for you to manage your capital budgets and your asset planning. Because if you go forward into what we call a bleeding edge technology, and you start to lose control of that technology due to the vendors being gone or a competing technology taking over, all of a sudden you're spending a lot more of your dollars in maintenance of that system rather than having those dollars available for capital investment or asset replacement.
Kevin or Ron?
Yeah, this is Kevin. I'd also echo that what we see is a lot more scenario planning, and not just the optimistic scenario, pessimistic scenario, but maybe a no regrets option. And as I said before, it's also integrating all these scenarios together. So it becomes a very complex capital planning process when you've got maybe 10 different smart grid initiatives with their own potential scenario analysis, and then you have to bundle it all together and come up with scenarios that meet your corporate vision as well as your regulatory mandates and what your customers are looking for. It's a much more complicated process than utilities have done in the past.
Terrific. Thank you. So that all that remains for me is to give a very sincere thank you to our presenters, to Ron Tate from Elster, to Kevin Cornish from Black & Veatch, to Douglas Marks for Pacific Core. Thanks for your time and for your helpful advice. And thanks to all of you as well for joining us today. This is Jesse Burst of Smart Grid News. Hope to see you here again very soon.